The village on the edge of Abuja had always been a quiet place, resting like a forgotten jewel between the fast-rising towers of the city and the endless stretch of hills beyond. The people called it Okofu, a settlement old enough to have been sung about in folk tales, yet modern enough to feel the pull of Abuja's bright lights. Clay huts stood beside cement houses, narrow dusty roads twisted toward the hills, and in the heart of it all lay a large square where life began and ended for the villagers. On this particular morning, the square was alive with sound and color. Drums pounded like thunder in the hands of young men, and the air smelled of roasted goat meat, palm wine, and smoke rising from firewood. Women in shimmering ankara danced in circles, their wrappers tied tightly around their waists, beads clattering against their necks. Children ran barefoot across the square, laughing, their voices rising like birds into the sky. Today was not an ordinary day. Today, a new chief would be crowned, the man the people had chosen to lead them into what many believed was a golden future. His name was Oba Adeyemi, and even before he stepped into the square, whispers ran like fire among the people. He is the wealthiest man this village has ever seen. They say he is friends in the government, even in the city. Maybe his riches will lift us from suffering. But others shook their heads. They remembered the way Adeyemi's eyes burned when gold was mentioned, how his laughter grew sharper when land was spoken of. Some feared him, though none would admit it openly. When at last he appeared, silence spread across the square like a shadow. He was a tall, broad man, his skin the color of polished ebony, his bald head gleaming under the sun. A short, trimmed gray beard framed his proud face, and his agbada, flowing robes of cream embroidered with gold, billowed in the wind. Upon his head sat a red cap heavy with beads, the crown of a man stepping into power. The crowd bowed, some with respect, others with quiet unease. At his side walked Elder Musa, the oldest man in the village, his back slightly bent, his beard white as chalk. He wore a flowing babanriga of pure white, and in his hand he carried a staff carved with symbols no one could read anymore. To the villagers, Musa was not just an elder. He was memory itself, a living reminder of the old ways. The drumming ceased as Elder Musa raised his staff. His voice, though cracked with age, carried across the square with the weight of thunder. "Today," he began, "we crown Chief Adeyemi as the guardian of Okofu. By this staff, by this land, and by the spirits who walk the hills, he is bound to protect, not to betray." A murmur rippled through the people. Some clapped, others nodded, but Adeyemi only smiled. His lips curved, yet his eyes, sharp, restless, betrayed no humility. He stretched his hands toward the sky and spoke with a voice deep and commanding. "I, Adeyemi, son of this soil, promise wealth, promise greatness, promise to lead Okofu into a future where our children will never know hunger. The land will prosper, and I will prosper with it." The people erupted in cheers, but Elder Moose's eyes narrowed. He tapped his staff on the ground 3 times, the sound echoing unnaturally loud. "Remember, Chief," he said, his voice like the crackle of dry leaves, "a man who takes an oath before the spirits must not break it. The hills are watching, and the land remembers." For a moment, silence clung to the air. Adeyemi's smile faltered, just slightly, before he raised his arms again, and the drummers struck their skins, drowning the warning in thunderous rhythm. Night fell on Okofu like a heavy curtain. The celebration ended, the fires died, and the villagers returned to their homes. In the mansion that towered at the edge of the village, far larger than any hut or house, Chief Adeyemi sat awake. His golden agbada lay folded by his bedside, and before him, on a carved wooden table, stood a small chest filled with coins, jewels, and papers. He traced his thick fingers over them, his eyes glowing in the dim light of the oil lamp. "Guardian of the people," he muttered, chuckling. "No, I am guardian of wealth." But the wealth was not enough. The city was near, and he had seen Abuja's high towers, its endless cars, It's men in suits who moved with the arrogance of gods. He wanted that life, wanted to rise above the dusty square, wanted his name written not just in Okofu, but in Abuja's halls of power. And so, when the moon reached its highest point, Adeyemi left his mansion and walked toward the hills. The path was narrow, overgrown with grass, and the wind howled like a chorus of unseen spirits. He carried a calabash of palm wine, a bowl of kola nuts, and a black rooster bound by its legs. His feet crunched over stones as he climbed higher, the village shrinking behind him until only shadows remained. At the top of the hill stood a flat rock where sacrifices had once been made generations ago. The elders had forbidden it now, saying the spirits were no longer to be disturbed. But Adeyemi did not care. He placed the calabash on the stone, scattered the kola nuts, and raised the rooster in his hands. "Spirits of the hills," he called, his voice echoing. Chief Adeyemi called to you. Give me wealth, give me power, give me dominion beyond this village. Make me greater than all, and I will pay your price." The wind died. The night grew still. And then, from the darkness, it came. A figure rose from a mist, tall as a palm tree, draped in shadows that moved like smoke. Its eyes glowed like coals, piercing through the dark. When it spoke, its voice was not one but many, like whispers layered over thunder. "You asked for wealth. You asked for power. You asked for dominion. Do you know the price?" Adeyemi's hands trembled, but greed steadied him. He lifted the rooster high, then slit its throat with a knife, letting the blood spill onto the stone. "I will pay it." The spirit's laughter rolled across the hills, shaking the ground. "Your wealth will cost you your village. Your power will cost you your people. Are you ready to bear such a curse?" Adeyemi swallowed, his chest heaving. He thought of Abuja, of endless riches, of his name rising higher than kings. "Yes," he whispered, "I am ready." The spirit leaned closer, its breath cold as death. "Then so it shall be. The land remembers. The land always remembers." The mist swirled, the figure vanished, and the night roared with the cry of the hills. Adeyemi stumbled back, his agbada soaked in blood, his heart pounding. He had made his choice, and somewhere, deep beneath the soil of Okofu, something stirred awake. The earth groaned softly, a sound no human ear could hear, like a sigh escaping from the forgotten veins of the land. Roots twitched as though disturbed. Stones shifted beneath the hill, and the air thickened with a strange heaviness. The sacrifice had been accepted, but it had also broken a silence that had lasted for centuries. Adeyemi did not feel the soil shiver, but he felt the wind return, this time sharper, cutting across his skin like a blade. The mist around him thinned, and the moon emerged again, casting a pale glow across the old sacrificial stone. His hands shook, not from fear but from triumph. He had dared, and he had been answered. With his blood-stained agbada flapping against his legs, he descended the hill, muttering to himself, "Let them say what they will. I will not be like the chiefs who came before me. I will not die a poor man in a poor village. The land will bend to me." But the land did not bend. It listened, and it remembered. By dawn, Okofu awoke to a chief already changed. The villagers noticed it first in his eyes. Where there had once been ambition, now there burned something hungrier, sharper, as though a shadow had lodged itself behind his pupils. His voice carried differently too, louder, deeper, filling the air even when he spoke simple greetings. Some whispered that the spirits had truly blessed him. Others feared he had carried something unnatural from the hills. One who noticed more than most was Aisha, a young woman of 23 who sold vegetables by the roadside. Her skin was smooth and dark, her head wrapped in a bright yellow scarf that caught the morning sun, and her eyes, always watchful, missed nothing. She had grown up listening to the warnings of Elder Musa and knew well the tales of chiefs who forgot their promises. That morning, as she arranged baskets of peppers and okra, she watched Adeyemi stride through the square. His agbada was spotless now, as though last night's blood had never touched it, but his steps carried a strange arrogance. He no longer waved at the children who ran past, nor did he nod at the elders seated in the shade. Instead, he walked as though every inch of the land belonged to him. "He is not the same," Aisha whispered, her fingers tightening around the basket. Beside her, Okon, a wiry young fisherman with strong arms and restless eyes, laughed. "Not the same? Of course not. He's a chief now. Power changes every man." Aisha shook her head. "This is not the change of power. This is something else." Okon frowned but said nothing more. He knew better than to argue when Aisha spoke with that tone. She had a way of sensing things before they happened, and though the villagers never called her a seer, many had quietly sought her advice when dreams troubled their sleep. Later that day, the council gathered inside the chief's mansion. The building was unlike any other in Okofu, with polished tiles on the floors, glass windows that glimmered under the sun, and gates of iron that stood taller than 3 men. The walls inside were painted cream, and framed photographs of Adeyemi in suits lined the corridors. The council members, 7 men and 2 women, all dressed in traditional attire, sat in a semicircle, waiting for their chief. Elder Musa was among them, his staff resting against his knees, his eyes sharp despite his frail frame. When Adeyemi entered, the room shifted. His agbada was a deep blue today, embroidered with silver threads that shimmered as he moved. He did not bow to the elders, as chiefs usually did, but simply took his seat at the head of the room. "My people," he began, his voice booming, "I have called you here to speak of the future. Okofu must no longer remain hidden in the shadow of Abuja. We must grow. We must sell our lands to those who can build. Factories, hotels, estates that will bring wealth. And with wealth, our name will rise." Murmurs spread among the council. One of the women, Madame Ifioma, leaned forward, her wrapper rustling. "But chief, the lands you speak of, these are farms. They feed our children. If we sell them, where will our people plant yams and cassava?" Adeyemi's jaw tightened, but his smile remained. "Do you want yams alone? Or do you want a future where your children walk in shoes from abroad, live in houses with running water, drive cars instead of trekking?" The council hesitated, torn between tradition and temptation. Only Elder Musa's voice cut through the confusion. "Chief Adeyemi," he said slowly, "wealth built on the bones of the land will not last. The soil is not merely soil. It carries memory. It carries spirit. If you strip it bare, you strip your people bare too." Adeyemi's eyes flashed, and for a moment his smile dropped. The shadow behind his gaze darkened, as though stirred by Musa's words. But quickly he laughed. "Elder Musa, your wisdom is deep, but times have changed. This is not the age of sacrifices and chants. This is the age of progress. If we do not move forward, the world will leave us behind." The council fell silent, the air heavy. In that silence, a faint tremor passed beneath the floor, so subtle no one but Musa felt it. He gripped his staff tighter, his heart sinking. Something had been awoken indeed. That night, Okofu dreamed strange dreams. Children cried in their sleep, muttering words their parents could not understand. Old men woke in sweat, clutching their chests, haunted by visions of rivers running red. Women heard voices whispering in the corners of their huts, voices that vanished when lamps were lit. Aisha too dreamed. In her vision, she stood by the river where Okon often fished, and the water boiled with fire. From the flames rose a figure cloaked in shadows, its eyes burning like embers. It pointed at her and spoke with a voice that was not a voice but 1,000 echoes. "The chief has chosen. The land remembers, and soon it will take back its price." Aisha woke with a scream, her heart hammering. She clutched her scarf tightly around her head and stared into the darkness. The dream felt too real, too heavy to dismiss. She knew she had to speak to Elder Musa. The following morning, the square buzzed again, but this time with unease. Word had spread of the dreams. Villagers muttered in corners, avoiding the gaze of their chief. Adeyemi noticed, of course, but instead of worry, his smile grew sharper. He had received news from Abuja. Men of influence wanted to meet him, men who could bring contracts, money, and recognition. As he sat in his mansion preparing for the journey, he thought nothing of the unease outside. To him, the people were fearful because they could not yet see the greatness ahead. To him, dreams were nothing but shadows of the weak. But in the hills, the shadows stirred again. The blood spilled on the sacrificial stone had not been forgotten. The earth shifted, the wind whispered, and the spirits watched. Okofu was no longer just a village on the edge of Abuja. It had become the stage for a battle between greed and memory, between oath and betrayal. And though the people did not yet know it, the curse had already begun. Chief Adeyemi's first journey to Abuja, as the new leader of Okofu, carried him with a pride that almost lifted him above the ground. His convoy, a single black SUV borrowed from a wealthy friend, carried him through the red earth roads until the tarmac of the capital stretched smooth beneath the tires. He had dressed in immaculate white agbada, a gold cap crowning his head, his walking stick polished to a shine though he hardly needed it. His chest swelled with every kilometer closer to the city. Here, in the land of glass towers and bustling traffic, he felt at home. This was the world he longed for, the world of power and recognition. In a tall hotel at the edge of Maitama, he met them, the men from Abuja, politicians with heavy rings on their fingers and businessmen whose perfumes filled the air long before their voices did. They welcomed him with wide smiles and empty promises. Chief Adeyemi, one of them said, clinking his glass, "We hear Okofu has fertile land. Fushland. Imagine what we can build together. Factories, estates, resorts. You will be remembered not just as a chief, but as a visionary." Adeyemi laughed, raising his own glass. "Okofu is ready. The land is ours to use." But when the men toasted, something behind him moved. For a moment, in the mirror on the wall, Adeyemi thought he saw a figure, a shadow taller than any man, its face hidden, its hand resting on his shoulder. He blinked, and it was gone. His heart quickened, but he forced a smile. The deal was sealed that night. Back in Okofu, Elder Musa sat with Aisha under the shade of the great Irako tree. His staff lay across his knees, his wrinkled fingers tracing patterns in the dust. "You saw in your dream?" he asked. Aisha nodded, her scarf drawn tightly around her head. The river boiled with fire. A figure pointed at me. It said, "The chief has chosen, and the land will take its price." Musa's eyes darkened. The hill has been silent for many years. But silence is not absence. The spirits only sleep. When blood touches their stone, they wake. "But why me?" Aisha whispered. "Why show me this?" "Because you listen," Musa said, his voice grave. "Others ignore dreams, but you feel them in your bones. The spirits choose those who will not look away." Aisha shivered, clutching her wrapper. "Then what do we do?" Musa looked toward the chief's mansion, its iron gates glinting in the sun. "We wait. The land will show us its hand soon enough." Night fell again. The river beside Okofu grew restless. Okon, the fisherman, sat by its bank with his net folded beside him. He had come not for fish, but for quiet. Yet even in the quiet, the river spoke. Its surface rippled, though no wind blew. The moon cast a silver line across the water, but the line broke, twisted, and for a heartbeat, Okon swore he saw faces in the ripples. Faces crying, faces gasping, faces that sank beneath the waves before he could blink. He stumbled back, clutching his chest. His first instinct was to call Aisha, but he stopped. He knew what she would say. She would speak of curses and spirits, and Okon did not want to believe. He wanted to believe the river was only water. But deep inside, he knew better. The curse spread quietly at first. The harvest of that season rotted too early. Yams shriveled underground, maize stalks bent before ripening, and cassava roots turned bitter. Farmers brought their withered crops to the square, muttering about strange smells in the soil, about whispers in the wind that made goats restless and dogs bark through the night. When the complaints reached Adeyemi, he waved them off. "Sacrifice to the gods if you must," he said, "but do not bring your fears to me." Progress has its price. Soon factories will feed your children more than yams ever could. The villagers left, unsatisfied, their unease deepening. A week later, during the village's evening gathering, the first true sign appeared. The people sat in the square as drummers beat rhythms into the night air. Women in colorful wrappers swayed to the music, and children clapped, their laughter rising like sparks. For a moment, Okofu felt alive again. Then the ground shivered. The drums faltered. The dancers froze. From the edge of the square, a great crack split through the earth, cutting across the packed soil like a scar. Dust rose, and from within the crack came a low hum, a sound like 100 voices groaning in unison. Children screamed. Mothers pulled them close. The drummers dropped their sticks. Only Adeyemi stood, his voice ringing out. Do not fear. It is nothing but the ground shifting. The earth changes as we do. But his eyes betrayed him. He saw what others did not. Within the crack, beneath the dust, shadows moved. Long, finger-like shapes reaching upward, retreating only when the villagers crowded too close. Elder Musa struck his staff against the ground. This is no ordinary shift. The land answers back, Chief Adeyemi. You must confess what you have done. Adeyemi's face hardened, anger flashing across his features. Enough of your superstitions, old man. This village will move forward whether you accept it or not. The crowd trembled between fear and loyalty, between the wisdom of the elder and the authority of the chief. The night ended with no answers, only silence. Days stretched into weeks, and the air of Okofu thickened with dread. Chickens ladnoiks. Palm trees dripped sap like blood. Even wells gave water that tasted of iron. The people grew restless, murmuring curses under their breath. Some whispered of leaving the village altogether. Aisha, however, refused to leave. She returned often to Elder Musa, seeking his counsel. The land will not release us easily, Musa told her one night, the firelight flickering across his weathered face. The chief has tied us to his oath. When he bled upon the stone, he did not bleed alone. His oath binds the whole village. Aisha's heart sank. So we are all condemned because of him? Not condemned, Musa said slowly, but tested. The spirits demand balance. What is taken must be replaced. What is broken must be mended. She swallowed, the words heavy in her chest. And how do we mend it? Musa looked into the flames. That, child, is yet to be revealed. Meanwhile, in Abuja, Adeyemi's name spread quickly. The men he had dined with opened doors for him. He signed papers, shook hands, posed for photographs beside men whose faces filled newspapers. Money trickled, then poured. His mansion in Okofu doubled in size, its walls rising higher, its lights shining brighter than the stars. But with each gain, the curse deepened. He woke in the middle of nights to whispers in his ear. He looked in mirrors and saw eyes that were not his own staring back. Sometimes, when he stood in meetings, the ground seemed to pulse beneath him like a heartbeat. Yet he told no one. To the world, Chief Adeyemi was rising. To himself, he was haunted. The final blow of scene one came on the night of the Festival of New Harvest, a festival that had nothing to celebrate this year. The villagers gathered reluctantly, more out of tradition than joy. Fires burned in iron braziers, drums echoed, dancers moved with forced energy. Adeyemi stood tall at the center, smiling as though nothing had gone wrong, flanked by men in suit from Abuja who had come to witness the rich culture of his people. But then the fires dimmed. One by one, the flames guttered out until only the moon lit the square. The drumming ceased, replaced by a low moan rising from the earth itself. The ground trembled violently, sending baskets and calabashes tumbling. From beneath the square, the crack that had once appeared split wider, gaping open like a wound. This time all saw it. From within the fissure rose a black mist, coiling upward like smoke, twisting into shapes that were almost human but not. The crowd screamed. Some fled, others dropped to their knees, praying. Adeyemi raised his arms. Stand firm. This is nothing." But his words were drowned by the voice that followed. It came from everywhere and nowhere, deep as thunder, sharp as fire. The blood was taken. The oath was made. The land remembers. The land demands. The mist swirled, spreading through the square. Children wailed. The Abuja men fled, their polished shoes slipping in the dust. Only Elder Musa stood firm, his staff glowing faintly in the moonlight. "The curse has begun," he cried. "Okofu, prepare yourselves. What has been buried shall rise again." Adeyemi's face blanched, his smile broken at last. For the first time, doubt pierced his pride. And somewhere, beneath the soil of Okofu, something laughed. The sound was not carried on air, nor spoken with tongue, but it trembled in the bones of those gathered in the square. Men clutched their chests, women cried out, and even the bravest hunters stumbled back as though a cold hand had gripped their spines. The mist that had risen from the crack in the earth coiled like smoke and spread outward, touching huts, palm trees, even the chief's shining mansion at the edge of the square. Chickens squawked and scattered. Goats butted at their ropes, their eyes wide with unnatural terror. Chief Adeyemi tried to speak. His lips moved, his arms lifted, but no sound came. The voice of the earth had silenced him. For the first time since his coronation, he stood powerless before his people. Elder Musa struck his staff on the ground 3 times. The glowing lines carved into its wood flared with pale light, pushing back the mist in a small circle around him. "Okofu," he cried, "the oath has been broken. The chief has fed the land with false blood. The spirits have risen to claim what was denied." The crowd gasped, their fear turning toward anger. Many looked at Adeyemi, whose face was now slick with sweat. He raised his hands in protest. "Lies! Old man, you seek to shame me. I gave this village hope. I opened the doors of Abuja for us." But he was cut short. The crack in the ground widened with a thunderous roar. From its depths, not smoke this time, but shadows rose, tall, twisting, shapeless things with arms like branches and eyes like burning coals. They towered above the crowd, their gaze fixed on Adeyemi. The people screamed and scattered, running into the night. But Aisha did not run. She stood beside Musa, her hands trembling, yet her eyes locked on the shadows. In that moment, she felt what she had felt in her dreams, the weight of something vast and ancient pressing against her chest. "The land knows his name," she whispered. "The land has chosen him." Musa nodded grimly. But curses never consume only the guilty. The innocent will bleed as well, unless... Unless what? Aisha asked. Musa's voice dropped to a whisper. Unless balance is restored. That same night, Abuja glittered with its lights and music. The men who had feasted with Adeyemi in Maitama returned to their mansions, drinking wine, laughing over deals sealed and profits promised. They knew nothing of Okofu's terror, but the curse knew no borders. It began subtly. The water supply in a section of the city turned black for 3 days, though no pipe had broken. Crows gathered by the hundreds on rooftops, their cries echoing down the boulevards. A wealthy politician woke screaming in his sleep, claiming that faceless figures had crawled from beneath his bed and whispered in his ears, "Return what was taken." By morning, he was found lifeless, his body twisted unnaturally, his face locked in terror. Doctors called a stroke. The elders of Okofu would have called it payment. Meanwhile, Adeyemi's mansion became a fortress. He shut his gates, surrounded himself with guards, and traveled often to Abuja in hopes that power and money could shield him from a curse. But each time he looked in the mirror, he saw the same thing. Not his face, but the face of another, a long, hollow visage, eyes glowing faintly red, mouth stretched into an endless sneer. And always, he heard the laughter. At night, he dreamed of the stone on the hill where he had spilled his blood. Only now, the stone was covered in roots, and the roots were feeding on him, draining his flesh until only bone remained. He woke screaming, drenched in sweat, his wives trembling beside him. "Chief," one of them whispered one night, "let us leave Okofu. Let us flee to Lagos, or even across the sea." Adeyemi struck her. Silence. I am chief here. Nothing drives me from my land. But even as he spoke, he felt the ground shift beneath the bed, and the laughter rose again. The people of Okofu suffered. Crops died, wells dried, sickness spread. Children coughed with fevers that no medicine cured. Women miscarried in numbers too heavy for mourning songs. At first they grumbled, then they wept, then they turned their anger toward the chief. One evening, a crowd gathered at his gates, torches in their hands, voices raw with fury. "Give us back our land," they shouted. "You have cursed us. Chief Adeyemi, your greed is killing us." The guard tried to push them back, but the crowd only grew. Inside, Adeyemi stood trembling, sweat running down his brow. He wanted to order the guards to fire their guns, but something older than fear stayed his tongue. He looked out and saw Aisha among them, her face lit by torchlight, her eyes burning not with fear, but with resolve. She raised her voice above the crowd. "Chief Adeyemi, you betrayed the oath. You fed your blood to the hill, and you sold our land to strangers. If you do not confess, the land itself will swallow you whole." The crowd roared in agreement, their torches swaying like stars. Adeyemi turned from the window, his hands shaking. He whispered to himself, "I will not fall. I will not fall." But somewhere deep beneath the soil, the laughter grew louder. That night, Elder Musa gathered Aisha and Okon by the river. The moon was high, its reflection broken by ripples that seemed to move of their own accord. "The land is angry," Musa said. "And anger of the land cannot be quenched with gold or blood of goats. Only truth can quiet it." Okon frowned. "Truth? What truth?" Musa looked at him, then at Aisha. His eyes were heavy with sorrow. "The truth of the chief's betrayal. The truth of his oath. The land demands confession, not denial. Only then can balance be restored. And if he refuses?" Aisha asked. Musa's voice sank like stone into water. "Then Abuja will burn, and Okofu will vanish into the earth." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the river's uneasy murmur. In the weeks that followed, the curse reached deeper into Abuja. Strange storms raged without warning, lightning striking glass towers. Birds flew in wild flocks that darkened the skies. Hospitals overflowed with patients struck by sudden illness, eyes rolling, voices muttering words in languages long dead. The newspapers called it unexplained. The politicians called it unfortunate. But in Okofu, they called it justice. And in the shadows, the laughter never ceased. It crawled through the cracks of Abuja's shining towers, slipping under doors and echoing in the corners of silent rooms. At first, the laughter was faint, like a half-remembered dream. But as days turned to weeks, it grew louder, more insistent, until even the most hardened politicians awoke with sweat on their brows, convinced that something unseen stood at their bedside. The city that prided itself on progress began to wither. Markets emptied faster than they filled, as traders whispered that their goods were cursed. Entire streets were left abandoned after residents claimed to see shadowy figures dancing in their compounds at night. And though Abuja was lit by countless electric bulbs, the people began to swear that the nights felt darker than ever before. But in Okofu, the curse weighed heavier still. One dawn, a boy named Sola ran screaming into the square. His clothes were torn, his eyes wild. The people gathered as he stumbled to the ground. "What happened?" a woman asked, lifting him up. "The river," he gasped, pointing toward the east. "The river has turned to blood." Cries filled the air as the people rushed to see. Indeed, the river that sustained Okofu had changed overnight. Its waters were thick and red, foaming as though alive. The smell of iron and rot clung to it, and dead fish floated belly up, carried away by the current. Elder Musa stood at the bank, his staff planted firmly in the ground. His face was pale, his eyes heavy with grief. "It has begun," he said. "The land is bleeding with us." That evening, Aisha sat outside her hut, staring at the horizon where Abuja's lights glimmered faintly. Okon sat beside her. Sharpening his cutlass, though, there was no hunt to be made. "This is too much," he muttered. "Crops dead, children sick, the river poisoned. How long before we starve?" Aisha did not answer. Her mind was far away, caught in the dreams that had plagued her each night. She saw the stone on the hill, the blood spilling across it, and the shadows rising again and again. But more than that, she saw Adeyemi's face, first proud, then frightened, then swallowed whole by the earth. "What if Musa is right?" she asked softly. "What if this can only end with truth? What if we must force the chief to confess?" Okon stopped sharpening. He turned to her, his jaw tight. "And if he refuses? He has guards. He has money. Abuja protects him. What can villagers like us do against that?" Aisha's eyes hardened. "We can speak. We can refuse to be silent." 2 nights later, the village gathered once again in the square. Torches burned bright against the night, their flames flickering in the restless wind. The people murmured with fear and fury, their voices rising in waves. Adeyemi appeared at last, flanked by armed guards. He wore a white agbada embroidered with gold, but his face betrayed him, sunken eyes, trembling lips, sweat staining his brow. "My people," he began, his voice unsteady, "I have heard your cries. I know the land is troubled, but these are not curses. They are challenges. Every village has trials. This will pass." A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd. A woman shouted, "Liar!" Others echoed her, their anger mounting. Aisha stepped forward, her small frame standing firm against the torch's glow. "Chief Adeyemi," she said, her voice steady and clear, "do not deceive us. The land remembers what you did. You spilled blood on the hill, and you sold our sacred ground. You broke the oath of our fathers. Confess before the people, or the land will consume us all." The crowd erupted, their voices pressing against the chief like storm. Adeyemi's guards raised their rifles, but he lifted a trembling hand to stop them. His gaze locked on Aisha, and for the briefest moment, fear flashed across his face. But pride was stronger than fear. "I'll know one confession," he roared. "I'm a chief of Okofu. I brought wealth. I brought power. Do you think the land rules me? I rule the land." The ground shuddered beneath his feet. The torches flickered wildly, and from the earth came the laughter again, louder, closer, as though it was rising through the very soles of their sandals. The people screamed and fled into the night, leaving only Musa, Aisha, and Okon standing firm. Adeyemi staggered, clutching his chest. His guards rushed to him, but their eyes betrayed terror. They, too, had heard the laughter. That night, Abuja's towers shook with a storm unlike any other. Lightning split the skies again and again, striking the steel and glass. One building in the business district caught fire, its flames dancing high into the night as if mocking human pride. Cars stalled inexplicably on the highways, their horns blaring in unison like cries of despair. In the government quarters, ministers awoke to find their walls covered in cracks, spreading across their ceilings like veins. Some claimed to see faces in those cracks, faces twisted in rage, whispering their names. News stations tried to explain it away as infrastructure failure, as climate anomaly, as coincidence. But the people of Abuja whispered otherwise. And in Okofu, no one doubted what they already knew. Elder Musa called a secret meeting in his hut. Aisha, Okon, and 3 other elders sat in the dim glow of an oil lamp. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the faint scent of blood from the river. "The curse grows with each passing day," Musa said. "Soon, Abuja itself will crumble, and Okofu will be dragged into the earth. We cannot wait for Adeyemi to confess. We must confront him." One of the elders, Baba Tund, shook his head. "Confront him? He will deny us again. Worse, he will order our deaths. Then let the land speak through us," Musa said, his voice trembling but firm. "If he will not confess with his lips, the earth will drag confession from his soul." Aisha leaned forward. "What must we do?" Musa's eyes gleamed with sorrow. "We must bring him back to the hill where it began. Only there can the land judge him. Only there can the truth be forced into the open." The hut fell silent. Outside, the laughter rose again, echoing through the trees like a chorus of unseen spirits. And so, the decision was made. In the days that followed, the villagers grew bolder. They refused to bring food or tribute to Adeyemi's mansion. His guards muttered among themselves, their loyalty waning as sickness spread even within the walls of the compound. One by one, Adeyemi's allies in Abuja began to distance themselves. Politicians who had once feasted at his table no longer returned his calls. Businessmen who had praised him now whispered that he was cursed. Alone, surrounded by shadows and haunted by laughter, Adeyemi's pride began to crack. He locked himself in his chambers, staring endlessly at the mirror that mocked him with the hollow-faced apparition. Sometimes he swore the face in the glass spoke to him. "You cannot run," it whispered. "You cannot hide. The land will have its due." He smashed the mirror, but the face returned in every shard. On the final night of the moon, the villagers gathered once more. The air was heavy, charged, as if the heavens themselves were watching. Musa stood at the front, his staff glowing faintly with ancestral light. "Adeyemi," he called, his voice echoing across the compound gates. "The land summons you. Come forth, or be dragged forth." Silence answered. Then, slowly, the gates creaked open. Adeyemi emerged, his agbada torn, his eyes bloodshot, his body trembling. He looked less like a chief and more like a broken man. Yet his pride clung to him like a second skin. "I will not be judged by peasants," he spat. "You will not be judged by peasants," Musa replied, his voice grim. "You will be judged by the land." The crowd parted as Adeyemi stumbled forward, flanked reluctantly by guards who no longer raised their weapons. The path led to the hill, the place of the oath, the place where blood had been spilled. And as they walked, the earth groaned beneath their feet, the laughter swelling until it drowned out even the beating of their hearts. The path to the hill was lined with torches, their flames whipping violently in the restless wind. Abuja's skyline shimmered faintly in the distance, a fragile reminder of wealth and power. But here, in Okofu, the night ruled. The villagers followed in silence, fear clinging to their skin. Mothers clutched their children, and men carried charms they hoped would ward off whatever waited. Adeyemi staggered, each step heavier than the last. His fine agbada dragged in the dust, its gold embroidery dulled by sweat and tears. Behind him, the guards shuffled uneasily, no longer warriors but frightened men caught in something they did not understand. At last, they reached the hill. The stone lay at its center, smooth and glistening under the moonlight. Its surface seemed alive, pulsing faintly with red veins, as though blood still flowed beneath. The laughter erupted louder than ever, rising from the stone itself, echoing across the land. Women screamed, men dropped to their knees, and Adeyemi fell backward, clutching his ears. "No," he cried, his voice cracking. "It was not supposed to be like this. I gave them what they asked. I gave them blood." Elder Musa stepped forward, his staff planted firmly on the cursed earth. "You gave them what they demanded, but you broke the oath of your fathers. The land does not want bargains, Adeyemi. It wants truth. Confess." Adeyemi's eyes rolled wildly. His lips trembled. For a moment, it seemed as if he would speak, but pride clamped his jaw shut, and instead he roared at the sky. "I am chief. The land is mine. I will not bow to dirt and stone." The ground split beneath his feet. A sound like thunder shook the hill, though the skies remained clear. From the crack in the earth rose hands, long, skeletal, made of soil and bone. They clawed at Adeyemi's robes, dragging him down. He screamed, thrashing as the guards fled in terror. The villagers wailed, some collapsing, others running toward the trees. But Musa held his ground, his voice rising above the chaos. "Look, people of Okofu, look at what betrayal brings. The earth itself will not be mocked." As Adeyemi's body was pulled deeper, the stone cracked open fully. A dark mist poured forth, spreading across the hill and rolling into the fields below. The laughter multiplied, No longer one voice, but 1,000, male and female, young and old, echoing like a chorus of madness. And with it came ruin. By dawn, Abuja was no longer the city it had been. The mighty towers stood, but their glass gleamed black as though smoke had seeped inside. Rivers that once brought water now carried sludge and ash. In the markets, food spoiled within hours, turning black in baskets. Traders wailed, shaking their fists at the sky. Everywhere, people whispered the same name, Okofu. They said the curse had spilled from that village into the capital, that the chief's greed had angered forces no government could contain. Churches overflowed with worshippers, mosques filled with prayers. But no amount of faith silenced the laughter that seemed to haunt every shadow. And in Okofu, the suffering deepened. Crops withered in the fields overnight. Goats birthed stillborn young. Children coughed blood. Aisha stood in the square, her eyes burning with determination. If he will not confess, then we must cleanse the land ourselves. The curse came from the hill, and it must be broken at the hill. The people murmured, their faces pale but resolute. Okon stepped forward, his cutlass gleaming in the torchlight. Then we go back, he said. We finish what was started. Musa closed his eyes, tears slipping down his wrinkled cheeks. Yes, he whispered, but the land will demand a price. That night, they climbed the hill again. This time, it was not just the elders and the brave few. Almost the whole village came. Abuja's glow was dimmer now, as though the city itself bowed to the curse. The sky above was starless, covered in a red haze that pulsed like a living wound. The stone was cracked, split into jagged shards, each one glowing faintly with a red light. Mist curled around it like snakes, wrapping around the ankles of anyone who drew close. Musa raised his staff. The land waits. It demands sacrifice. The people froze, exchanging fearful glances. What sacrifice? Aisha asked. The blood of the betrayer, Musa replied. But Adeyemi is gone, swallowed already. Without him, it will seek another. Another? Okon asked, his hand tightening on his cutlass. Musa's eyes flicked toward Aisha, sorrowful and heavy. The curse hunts the pure to balance what was corrupted. The crowd gasped. Aisha's heart pounded. She stepped back, shaking her head. No, it cannot be me. But even as she spoke, the mist curled tighter around her feet. Suddenly, a scream erupted from the crowd. A child pointed at the stone, where Adeyemi's face had appeared, half submerged in the cracked surface, his eyes wide with terror. His mouth opened and closed, as if begging for release. The people wailed, some covering their faces. Musa raised his staff again. It is not too late. The land shows us the betrayer still suffers. If we give it truth, it may relent. But if we refuse, the ground rumbled violently. Shards of the stone split further, sending sparks of red light into the air. Abuja's towers trembled in the distance, their lights flickering out one by one. The laughter grew unbearable, louder than thunder, louder than screams. It pressed against their skulls, filling their heads with madness. And in that chaos, the people cried out, "Sacrifice! Sacrifice! Give the land what it wants." All eyes turned to Aisha. The night fell silent, save for the hiss of the mist circling her ankles. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Elders muttered prayers under their breath. Every torch seemed to dim, their flames shrinking as though the fire itself feared what was coming. Aisha's chest heaved. Her wide eyes darted from face to face. The people she had grown with, laughed with, fought for. Now their gazes were sharp with desperation, their voices whispering in frantic tones. She must be the one. The land has chosen her. If we do nothing, Abuja will fall. Okofu will burn. Aisha's heart thundered in her ears. "I'm not the betrayer," she cried, her voice breaking. "I stood with you. I warned you of the hill of the stone. I am not him." But the mist tightened, crawling up her legs like chains. The red light from the shattered stone pulsed harder, casting her shadow tall against the earth. Musa lifted his staff, his old eyes trembling with both fear and sorrow. "The land does not ask what is fair, my child. It asks what will restore balance." Innocence must pay for guilt. No, Okon shouted, stepping in front of her. His cutlass gleamed defiantly in the blood-red glow. If the land wants sacrifice, let it take me. I will not stand by while Aisha is given like a goat to slaughter. The crowd gasped, torn between awe and fear. But before Musa could answer, the ground roared again. The cracked stone bled a stream of black liquid that slithered like serpents across the soil. From its surface, Adeyemi's face stretched upward once more, his mouth opening in a howl that was not his alone, but echoed with countless voices. Blood, the voices shrieked. Blood for the land. Blood for the oath. The hill shook so violently that people fell to their knees. Torches tumbled and rolled, their flames snuffed out. The mist surged higher, wrapping Aisha's waist, her chest. Her cries pierced the night as she clawed at the air. Okon roared, swinging his cutlass at the mist. Each strike cut through, but the vapor reformed instantly, mocking his effort. Desperate, he turned on the stone itself, raising his blade high. If you want blood, he shouted, take mine. The cutlass fell. It struck deep into his own arm, and blood spilled across the cracked stone. The ground drank greedily, the red veins glowing brighter. For a moment, the laughter stopped. The mist loosened its grip on Aisha. Hope flickered in the villagers' hearts. But then the voices rose again, cruel and mocking. Not enough. Not enough. Innocence must pay. The mist seized Okon and hurled him aside. His body struck the ground with a sickening thud. He groaned, but did not rise. The people wailed. Musa dropped to his knees, pounding the earth with his fists. Then take me, he cried, tears streaming down his wrinkled cheeks. I'm elder of Okofu, keeper of the oath. Let my life end it. The stone quivered, the voices rumbling. For a breath, silence fell again. Then the laughter erupted once more. Too late, old one. The balance has spoken. The mist surged violently, wrapping around Aisha fully. Her body lifted from the ground, suspended in the air. Her eyes, wide with terror, locked on Musa's. Baba, she screamed. Musa's heart shattered. He beat the ground until his palms bled, but the earth did not answer. The villagers fell on their faces, wailing, begging, clawing at the soil. But nothing could stop it. The mist tightened once more, and with a deafening crack, the stone pulled Aisha into itself. Her scream echoed across Okofu, across Abuja, across the hills and rivers of the land. Then silence. Only the faint echo of laughter remained, softer now, satisfied. The mist dissipated. The stone stopped glowing. The red haze above the skies thinned, revealing scattered stars. The curse had been fed. By dawn, Abuja stirred once more. The towers stood tall again, their glass reflecting the rising sun. The rivers flowed clean, the markets filled with fresh food. Life seemed to return. But in Okofu, there was no celebration. The people gathered at the hill, their faces hollow, their hearts broken. The stone lay in shards, lifeless now, but the memory of its hunger would never fade. Mothers held their children tightly, whispering that the land had claimed the purest among them. Okon limped forward, blood still dripping from his wound. He fell to his knees where Aisha had stood. His voice broke as he whispered her name again and again. Musa raised his staff one last time, his body trembling. Let this be remembered, he said hoarsely. The land is not a thing to own. Betrayal has a price, and innocence may be demanded to pay it. Okofu will never forget. The people wept, and somewhere, deep beneath the soil, though the laughter had quieted, something still listened, waiting. The story of the chief who betrayed his village shows us that betrayal leaves scars deeper than the eyes can see, and in African folklore, every oath carries weight beyond the mortal world. If you were moved by this tale, know that there are many more legends, myths, and mysteries waiting to be told right here on Spiritual African Stories, where culture, suspense, and the supernatural meet. What did you think of this ending? Do you believe Aisha's sacrifice was truly the will of the land? Or was there another path the villagers could have taken? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice brings these stories alive. Which character stayed with you most, and why? Let's build a community that keeps African culture and storytelling alive for generations to come. Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. From haunted rivers to cursed crowns, from love that defies spirits to betrayal that reshapes kingdoms, the next chapters of African folktales are already on their way. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next spiritual African story. Every legend carries a lesson, and every curse whispers a warning.